You're listening to the Flex Success podcast, where we teach you how to be less shit.
I'm your co-host Lizzy, and this is Dean. We'll be covering all topics relating to health, fitness, and bodybuilding.
Join us as we use our in the trenches experience and up-to-date science to provide you with information that you can actually use.
If you like what we do, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and tag us on social media.
Everyone, I'm so happy to be back on the podcast because it was just Dean and George for the last episode, maybe two, but here I am. Stop freaking out. I'm back. But I'm back with Dean and George today. Hi, boys.
What's happening?
Yo. I was going to say, the people have heard my voice come on first recently, so they would have thought that something had happened to me as you just kicked off this podcast, Liz. So now I've gotten a little feminine. What can I say?
Instead, something had happened to me. I was a very quick story. In Venezuela, I was meant to be there for 2 short weeks, ended up there for 5 weeks, enjoyed very little of it. And I'm very pleased to be back in Spain. Dean and I are living here for at least 3 months in Valencia on the beach. And George, you've just come back from America as well.
Just got back to Vegas, the Olympia. It was pretty intense. That was an intense week, I will say that. It was a hell of a lot going on. That was a different ballpark for show that I've ever been to, that's for sure.
Congratulations, by the way. That's your first pro.
Yep, first guy I've turned pro, and also first Olympia qualification in the same day. That was a pretty crazy.
So cool.
It was funny.
Many to come.
I reflected on this a little bit after everything was all the glitz and glam was finished over, and I remembered in my book I wrote down at the start of the year there was two kind of short-term goal, long-term goal, and the first one was turn someone pro this year, and the second one was within 5 years get someone to the Olympia. By 10 months in, I'd kind of ticked both off. I was like, oh shit! Now what's the next step? What do I put in the goals now?
And what is the next step?
Me and Blake want to crack a top 3, and I want to try and get a decent squad. It was like this Brazilian team of all the Brazilian athletes were out there at the Olympia. They all stayed in the same hotel. They was all there in their matching tracksuits. I'm not really too fussed about that, but it looked really cool. So in my head now, I've got this idea in my head of all the flex team out there, all in their flex t-shirts, all competing at the Olympia. Like that's the vision I see now.
I love it. I mean, we had something similar to that in Australia this season that just passed, didn't we, Dean?
Very much so. Yeah, it was very much so the case. Heaps of people around, both current competitors and then also competitors of the previous seasons and the seasons to come. So it was really cool to have like a sort of like a place, I suppose, in the bodybuilding community of Australia where it was recognised that we were there as a group, which was very, very cool.
Yeah, and even our athletes in their off season came to support.
Yeah, like we had
flex shirts in the sea.
Like we had 25 people in one gym training at one stage, which was really, really cool to see.
And it was a rapid turnaround from sorting it out to them all turning up as well. It wasn't like it was planned in advance.
No, even to the point, like big shout out to actually Kyle Raggio. He was due to arrive into Melbourne on the Friday, and I'd message him say, "Hey, when do you get here again? I've got this training session happening on the Thursday, I think it was, And he was like, "Oh man, I don't get in till Friday. Why?" And then I told him why. He's like, "Bro, I'll just change my flights." And I was like, all right, well, you can stay with me for a night so you don't have to get extra accommodation. So, and that's what happened, man. It was cool.
No.
So Eugene Teo, he invited you to his gym, didn't he, Dean, with like a client or two? And in the end, it turned into like 25 clients.
Yeah, I was like, do you reckon I could just invite a couple of friends, like house party? I'll just bring a couple of mates. And then, I was just like, how about a few more mates? And what about a few more mates? And
then a photographer.
That's a good thing about Eugene. He's a lover of the industry, I suppose, and just of people. So for him, he was kind of like, ooh, like I would love to see how many of these individuals move in different ways. Like maybe there's some stuff here for me to have some fun with. And like I know at the very end of it, even Cam George said to him, hey, dude, can you look at my deadlift? Because I don't deadlift, but if I were to, like I'd like to know that I could maybe make it better, And then so he was helping him out with that, which was cool.
I was looking through the photos from that training session. Was it Brownie Gaines?
Mm-hmm.
His Instagram handle, the photographer. And Cam George's delts. Oh my God. They need their own postcode. I sent him a photo and I was like, Cam, your delts are so small. You're disgusting. Work on yourself. I can't believe those delts. What's happening?
I
mean, I often don't see his delts because I'm too busy saying what the fuck are these quads. So
it's Cam in general, though, right? His whole physique's just the what the fuck.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, he looks like shit. He looks like shit. Fuck Cam.
Fuck Cam. Work on yourself, like I said. Today, I have some questions for you boys because you've just finished a really successful and busy, kind of stressful as well, and exciting comp season. You're both.
So George is still in it. He's got a couple on this weekend too. So, and he's just spent all.
That's true. George just pulled an all-nighter.
I was gonna say he just spent all night, helping someone out with their load. So, props to George for being on the pod, even as it is.
Nah, it's all good. It doesn't stop. I'm technically jet lagged still in Vegas time, so this is actually quite normal for me.
Yeah, George is going to bed what's the time difference? You're going to bed at midday in England now because of the time difference.
Yeah, the Aussie comp, so I'll be waking up in Aussie more time for show day.
Okay, well, it's not over for George. But the point is, you are both veteran coaches, very successful at what you do. You have a good understanding of the industry, what makes a good athlete, what makes a good coach, peak week strategies, things like that. So I have some questions for you guys. The first one is, what are 3 things that make a good coach?
So I think I'm interested to see how different mine and Dean's answers are to this one. But I think at the top of that list for me would be an ethical moral compass. In the industry that we're in, especially the enhanced space, you have to be thinking about the 10, 20-year plan, not just the 6 months, 1 year in the future. And there's a lot of complications that can come from actions and behaviors made early on in bodybuilding that will bite you in the arse later on in life if you're not cautious with it. And some coaches will very boldly and aggressively just push and not think about that long-term problem. I think the ability to critically think is vitally important to be able to actually look at intellectually look at processes, applying data, analyzing of data, and observation, experience, all of the things that could help you make a decision or come to a conclusion for something, and take all those factors in consideration. And then the last one I would probably say is being as great as possible. And what I mean by that is we're neither in a camp on either side. We're not black or white. We are the neutral in the middle with a grey, so that we can then pick apart from either or side in whatever the conversation is when necessary.
All awesome. I had pretty similar ones to George, actually. One of them was very similar in that it was having the ability to be a problem solver. So around that critical thinking concept, I think that's super, super important. And I think that ties back into the idea of not being in a camp as well. In that if you're a problem solver, you're usually just looking for answers to that specific problem, as opposed to having, a set of things that you just follow and then you can't do anything when one of them fail. I actually think one of the other really important ones is having the ability to listen. But I think that kind of comes back into this, in that most coaches are just really good at being dictators and not very good at listening. And if you listen more, you can actually probably dictate a lot more accurately too. And the last one I had was having the ability to know when to push someone to be better, as opposed to when to help. Especially in the amateur space, probably more so when there's a lot of other life involved in contest prep, and not so much in the pro, where most of the time those guys are just doers than they are necessarily like having to worry about everything else. So we have a post, I think, on this coming up, actually, Liz, funnily enough, called Expectations versus Support, or it's about expectations versus the support of a coach, and whether you have high expectations and high support, or high support and low expectations. So the post will explain that. But I think knowing when to push somebody is really important, and knowing when to not push somebody, but maybe to ask more questions is also really important.
So I have a follow-up question for both of you. George, your first one was, or your second one was, doing the right thing in the beginning because it'll come back to bite you. So I want to ask an example of what that might be. And Dean, just before I forget, your question to you is, when you're saying knowing when to push someone, or when to, like, what would be the alternative? Just to let them take a break. But anyways, we'll get to that in a moment. So George, what would be an example of your something that might come back to bite you later on?
So the prime easiest example here is really pretty relevant in Australia and in the female space specific to performance enhancing drug practice. There's plenty of coaches that will prescribe Anavar like Smarties to girls during their comp prep, or even their off season, on some quite bogus old school practices, the 8 weeks on, 4 weeks off, whatever it is, with no real thought process to the consequence of virilization, no explanation of what that is. The amount of consults I have with girls that come to me that say, oh, none of this was explained to me, none of this process, none of the context was applied. There was no ability for them to actually make their own decision or informed decision based on the information prescribed. They just got told, take this, do this. And that is where the ethical moral compass comes back into it. It's, as a coach, we should not it's not their expectation to know the ins and outs of every single part of this process. That's our job, and it's our job to coach them through that and make sure that they have all the information necessary to make the right decision. And at times, sometimes make those decisions that might be against what they want to do, like when most people wanted to push drugs harder, in light of that 10-20 year plan where health consequences could come back to bite you.
Okay.
Even just quickly on that, from a development perspective, you can drug on muscle, but you can't drug on time.
Yep.
And there's a huge difference between somebody who has 5 kilos on their physique tomorrow versus somebody who's had it on there for 5 years. And we've seen this in like previous Olympia winners, in like people like Big Ramy. Massive progression in the first few years of his career, just didn't look that good. Didn't really change that much in weight over the years, and time gave him his physique. So I think that's super important. As for mine, Liz, knowing when to push, what I mean there is more specifically like when somebody hasn't complied or come to the party with the expected amount of performance or effort or control, and there'll be periods or there'll be people where it's important for me to realize this person needs more questions asked to try and figure out whether or not we can eradicate like this, say, overeating period that they've just had. So it's about questions and education, as opposed to me at some point saying, listen here, this is what you need to do. Enough is enough. Like, you're now taking the piss. My expectations are is that, yeah, you do better. And if you don't do better, this is the consequence. I think a lot of people come down on people first as opposed to the other way around. And I think sometimes it's necessary to have a bit of a hybrid approach.
The good coach, bad coach conversation, knowing when to turn it on, when to turn it off.
Jekyll and Hyde. I'm like, here, like, do I beat him up or do I cuddle him?
I kind of see it as like giving tough love or giving a cuddle.
Yeah.
Because sometimes clients just need a hug and they need to know, like, I'm here to support you. Let's talk about this. That's sort of how I see it.
But sometimes tough love can also be a punch in the face.
Yeah, definitely. It can be like, bro, I expect so much more of you. Like, you can do better. You've done hard things before. They just need to know that, like, I don't know, this isn't okay. And we expect more of you. Then how would you know which one to give? What might be an indication of one versus the other?
Man, that's a difficult question to answer because it's so individually specific, and even like context and scenario specific. And it's having the ability to like read between the lines. It actually, you know what? Like there's a question later on. I don't know if I should just jump to it. It was about like what are most coaches lacking in, and I think this is the difference. And mine was, I think a lot of coaches, at least on the amateur level, amateur coaching level, that is like coaching just amateurs, they lack a lot of soft skills. They lack a tremendous amount of soft skills. And I think they're really important in coaching amateur athletes because they do have other life stuff and things to consider more so than the pro athletes. The pro athletes obviously are not like just a special species, but just they usually function a little bit differently than what amateur athletes do.
They're really geared towards more of an unbalanced life because of their goals, and they're quite happy with that. So it's usually kind of okay being the doer.
Yeah. So I think it's understanding, like some of the language that they might use. Like, oh man, I just don't have the ability to say no when I start eating this, and I'm like, ooh, there's a red flag comment. Versus, hey, dude, I was a little hungry on the weekend. I decided to just eat a bit more. That person, I'm going to be like, no, mate, that's not acceptable. Like. There's a reason why we have this in play. The other person might be like, okay, we need to talk a little bit more about this. Let's unpick this scenario. But I don't think coaches would know how to do that unless they actually educate themselves, which is part of the 3 things that make a good coach.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. Okay. Next question. What is one thing that makes a good competitive athlete that you think is undervalued or maybe surprising for people to hear?
I still think the most undervalued thing is time and patience, especially what I see within young, not referencing to age, but young within maturity of timeline of bodybuilding. Everyone wants everything tomorrow. We're in the generation of Amazon Prime. It's next day delivery on everything, and they have that expectation of physique goals. And it just really is so far the opposite end of the spectrum. Like the ability to grow muscle, to pull off body fat in a sustainable environment. None of these things can be done within a short time frame. And I think people really do lack, until they experience it, the understanding of how long it might actually take.
And you know what? If someone's training age is 2 or 3 years, where they are now versus when they started is probably like substantially different. But in year 5 and 6 and 7 and 10, it just gets harder and harder. And I think for a lot of people, if they knew how long it would take and how hard it would be, maybe they wouldn't start. So perhaps having too optimistic of an idea of how quickly you can grow might be a good way to get you started.
Absolutely.
but you really need to squash those expectations quickly because you're just going to get disappointed for sure.
You see it with the genetic elite, the ones that kind of, and this doesn't discredit some of their hard work because some of them do combine both genetics and amazing work ethic to create great things. But you see it all the time where an amateur will start blowing up in their first few seasons. It kind of comes to them relatively easy compared to others. And then when the going gets tough and they meet a problem or they've now got to actually bodybuild and actually look into the intricacies of things deeper, they just fall off and disappear to the wayside and you don't really see them compete again because the going got
Yeah.
tough and they were kind of riding on that easy kind of, oh, I just sniff protein and get bigger, you know? I smell chicken, put on 2 pounds.
What is this point of diminishing returns bullshit?
Yeah.
Uncanny timing on this commentary. I just sent a voice note that is this conversation to a client and just said, man, like you have to remember that your progress in year 1 was incredible. In year 2, it was incredible. But in year 3, it's gonna slow. In year 4, it's gonna slow. And like your reference point for success in that you're looking for particular changes in your physique are going to become increasingly more difficult to see. So you need to find wins in other places. And he brought it up to me actually saying, you know, like one of the things you said to me from the very beginning, which is, you know, if you cliche tick the box today, that then ticks the box for tomorrow, and that ticks the box for next week, and then next month, and then next year, and then the year after. And he's like, I always remember this so that I have a long-term approach, but it's hard to disassociate, you know, how I look with my, like whether or not I'm succeeding. And it's like, yeah, man, the more advanced you get, the more difficult it gets to progress. And the more you need to fine tune up even those daily task ticking because you need to get every little bit. And I think there's that, which is worth commenting on, which we have. And the other one, as you mentioned too, is I think there's a lot more people getting into bodybuilding now at an older age without having built the resilience of like younger sports and younger like difficulties. Because like it's seemingly that we're trying to like make life easier, like the Amazon Prime life. That's actually hilarious because whenever we get back to like the UK or Spain, we're like, woohoo, Amazon Prime, everything's so easy. So I think there's a lot of people out there that have a lot less resilience built through their adolescence, which the moment that with going gets tough, they just disappear. And my point for what makes a good competitive athlete is that I think the biggest difference I see is that athletes who are successful lean into challenges instead of fearing or running away from them. Like they don't let the challenge take up real estate in their mind. They're just like, this is a challenge, it exists, and I enjoy this because this is what I do. Yeah.
Process orientated rather than goal orientated.
Can I make a comment on what I think might help people have staying power within bodybuilding? So I'm not a competitive athlete. Currently, I just lift because it aligns with my values and I really enjoy it. But also, I just went through a really, really stressful period in Venezuela. I had a really hard time. And I still trained 4 or 5 days a week. I still ate well. I still did 8 to 10,000 steps at least every day. And it wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm so dedicated to bodybuilding, because I'm not a competitive athlete. I did it because training is good for my mental health. Eating well makes me feel better. I know that there are some things that are out of my control, like my situation in Venezuela. But the things that are within my control to help my mental health are the way that I move, the way that I eat, the way that I sleep. And so if we consider the things we need to do for bodybuilding, we need to train, we need to recover well, you know, insert drugs for some people, eat well. If we do these for bigger reasons as well, even if our motivation for bodybuilding at a time dips, we still continue those really important things.
Completely.
Yeah. So I suppose like if we're talking about one thing that makes a good competitive athlete, I might add to find reasons to do the important things outside of just bodybuilding. So when that motivation dips, you have another motivation to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. What is something you did differently this comp season compared to the past for your athletes as a coach, not as an athlete yourself?
I'd say the net end result was that I ended up moving less dials when it comes to peaking any of my athletes this time around, but it was a direct product of attempting to set up the environment in which that was a possibility. So I think this time around, I would say I pushed athletes a lot harder earlier than I typically normally would and made sure that I had a bit more saving grace time at the end just to cover, I guess, experience as seasons go and go, that you start to see how things can get in the way of your comp prep timelines, things can crop up like illnesses, family problems, all these things that aren't really predictable or things we can prepare for. So just having that kind of leverage at the beginning, starting earlier, pushing harder just to make sure that that environment was there at the end for less variables, I think that'll be the biggest notable change for me.
Okay. Does that mean you start dieting people a little earlier?
Yeah, some people were about 3 to 4 weeks sooner than I typically would have normally, and a few others were very much in a more aggressive rate of loss for the first sort of 6 to 10, more so than I normally would. And if things weren't moving quite as fast, instead of just sitting patiently, I would have pushed them a touch harder.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Just to give yourself wiggle room.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay.
I have done this before, but I did it probably 3 or 4 guys this time, as opposed to usually 1 or 2, by virtue mainly of timing, in that their growth phases had come to an end by virtue of, just fatigue. In that we had a long time between then and then stage, so that I actually I did a couple of guys where we dieted relatively relatively intensely, sorry, for a period, but then had a very long break in between. So like a 4 to 6 to 4 to 8 week period of essentially recomping before then dieting for only 8 to 12 weeks at the end. So the actual dieting phase was technically like 30+ weeks, but is split into the same amount of like total weeks in actual deficit. And that was incredibly successful for those guys. I wouldn't necessarily do it all the time, but I think if it's available to you to do, not to be afraid to do it. And the other one would be, it wasn't actually this season, but it was last season. And I technically junk loaded one of my clients, but I did it in my way. So, which most people might be a bit like, I think people were surprised by it. That's why I thought I'd bring it up. And that was one of my clients.
Junk loaded.
Yeah, loaded the night before on cheeseburgers, hamburgers, and fries. And I think that was it out of all of them.
Sorry, I'm not sure if my face says, why the fuck would you do that? But this is what my face says.
Yeah,
that's it at its core. That is Ronnie Coleman, blood and guts. Like,
why did you do that?
Calorically, it was a dense amount of calories that individual needed in a short period of time, knowing that he was going to be having to make weight for Classic. Digestively, he does very well on that food, and psychologically, he has a lot of buy-in on that food. Okay. He also was somebody who I found from testing, we test and measure this, was very responsive to a significant amount of sodium being dumped the night before the show. And when I say significant, I'm talking like 4,500 milligrams in one meal, which is the equivalent of about 10 grams of salt. And doing that through just pills and or salt isn't that enjoyable, but it is through French fries and hamburgers and cheeseburgers. And muffins. That was the other one. Sorry. So it was always like a Coles muffin, a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and some fries. It was actually two hamburgers and cheese.
Jamie Durago protocol.
Say again.
He loves a muffin load. That was a Jamie Durago protocol. He used to love a muffin load.
Yeah. So when I say I did it my way, is that like we tested a sushi load that didn't sit very well. It was too heavy. We tested, he said, I want to do a burger. I'm like, cool, you can do a burger, but it has to be McDonald's because at least I can pull some data from the internet. So I pulled the sodium numbers, I pulled the carbs, the fats, and you'll now see in our peak sheets that I have, it's something in there for hamburgers and cheeseburgers. And he really wanted like cheeseburgers with more cheese, but I said, no, you get hamburgers with less cheese. So it was a junk load, but it wasn't really a junk load. It was a calculated, significant calorie load.
I think we can all agree that McDonald's is, we don't really like using the word junk and clean or whatever, but I think we can all agree Macca's is junky food.
Yeah. It was literally
the real question is,
yeah.
Why is a hamburger without ham? It's a beef burger. Why is it called a hamburger?
It's the American way. That's what they call them, hamburgers.
But why?
But even the Germans call them hamburguesas, and so do the Spanish.
Doesn't answer my question, mate.
I know. I'm asking, like, why is it ham? Maybe it used
I don't know.
To be pork.
You can't get pork burgers, so maybe it's that.
I know.
Okay. I don't feel like this question is sufficiently answered.
No, I know the answer. I'm just going to go for it. I reckon the burger was created in Hamburg, Germany.
It's a pretty bold assumption, but it might be bang on.
We need a fact checker, a live fact checker. Look, let's go with that. You heard it here first, guys. This is the origin of hamburger. It's true. All right, cool. So what is something about bodybuilding that might surprise an outsider?
I like this one. Sometimes you will get a random naked ass pic of some shredded glutes from a man randomly at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and it's considered completely normal. Bodybuilding
is hands down the gayest sport.
It's very homoerotic. Not only will you get a picture of a man's glutes, but they will sometimes also bend over and touch their toes to show you their adductors and hamstrings, which may afford you the opportunity to potentially see what they had for breakfast.
Or they'll just put a sock on their dick and send you like a front photo and like.
Not even though. That's on social media right now. People were posting up some of the pros the other day just with their cock socks on. That's another thing that will surprise me, and I will say this that I'm not a fan of, and I think like, dude, seriously, the fuck is wrong with you? If you're a guy getting tanned, put a fucking sock on it. You don't need to.
Please do.
Like, I don't know why a guy would stand there with his cock out in a tanning tent. Not even just because you don't care, but like have some fucking respect, man. Like these people are like on their knees looking up at you, and they don't need your dangly cock looking at them back down. They see enough of this shit every day.
Not even impressive. By that point of prep, if you're dieted down correctly, it's like a deflated balloon at best. So what are you showing off?
I think it just comes down to the fact that your soul slowly shrivels away along with adipose tissue. So you just don't care. But the point is, other people care? Please put a sock on it.
Yeah, right.
But then funnily enough, with all of this though, the other thing I think a lot of people would be surprised by, given that it is such a image-based post this, look at me, sport, is that most of them who project a lot of confidence are actually incredibly insecure.
Yeah.
I'd
say like, the most confident people usually are the quiet achievers. They don't need to broadcast their success because other people will do it for them.
Can I just quickly interject?
Yes.
I have two things to answer from Google. Number one, after running out of their
hamburgers.
After running out of their hot pork sandwiches at the Erie County Fair in Hamburg, New York, Frank and Charles Menches mixed ground beef with spices and sold it between bread, naming it the hamburger. And then number two is the Oxford Language Dictionary, hamburger, origin, Hamburg, German. Hamburger, 19th century.
I feel like
they're conflicting facts because one's Hamburg, New York, and it has to do with ham because originally, it was a pork burger, I suppose, not necessarily ham. And the second one says Germany, so...
The second one aligns with Dean, so I'm going with that one.
No, because Dean said it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you might not be wrong.
Yeah.
I maintain a healthy level of skepticism, but you might not be wrong.
But was that Wikipedia? Was that a Google search?
That was Google. The place of origin is Germany or the United States. It's to be determined. It's either from Hamburg in Germany, or it was the pork sandwich comment that was there before about the New York one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go. Probably there's
Dean,
probably lots of reasons for this anyway. Yeah.
What is something about bodybuilding that might surprise an outsider?
That was mine. That most people who project confidence are actually incredibly insecure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have one that's so obvious to people who are in the sport, but apparently not so obvious to everyone else, which is when people are on stage or in stage condition, if you're to score how they feel on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being fantastic, they probably feel like a -3, right?
On a good day.
Yeah, on a good day. They feel awful, no energy, lethargic, weak, whatever. Like their personality shrivels up. But outsiders seem to have this idea that the better you look, so the more muscle, the leaner, the better you feel. And that's definitely true up until a point. And that point is maybe 3 weeks into prep. And beyond that, you feel awful. And I'm always surprised that this is a surprising fact.
There's that, and also that abs don't mean that you're fit.
That's very...
No, definitely. You can't see fitness. That's true.
My old man used to say that about all the footballers. Oh, you can tell he's fit. He's got a solid midsection. Like, thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right. Now, my next question.
Your hamburger logic from?
It's definitely hamburger logic.
That's where it comes from.
Federations within bodybuilding evolve. They close down, new ones open up. Some of them split into different branches. Some of them join together. What are your 5-year predictions for the current bodybuilding federations?
I think more of a broad spectrum over the natural space. I think over the next sort of few years, Australia's natural potential, natural caliber of athletes, get my words out, the natural caliber of athletes from Australia will be more recognized across the world. I think that the UK has a very good natural bodybuilding scene. There's a lot of very good competitors, a lot of high-end competitors, a lot of social media spread around those competitors in the UK, perhaps because they're in the right space for bodybuilding, I don't know. But the Oz space, I personally believe in both natural and enhanced, just for a side there. But have a better quality and pool of athletes. We said before, probably because of the the mass population of people that would compete and the scarcity of shows, it means that the cream will always rise to the top. But yeah, for the naturals, I think they're some of the best in the world from what I've seen in standard, and I would love to see that integrate over to America, into UK, and over to more shows.
Okay.
Mm. It's funny, though, because I would have always thought the Australian bodybuilders in the natural space were actually fairly well recognized, especially at upper echelon back 5, 10 years ago when I was like paying more attention to it. But because I'm just not in that space anymore, I just don't really know how they're perceived. I wouldn't have said this maybe 6 to 12 months ago, but I definitely will now. I think the current IFBB Pro League is just going to absolutely begin to squash every other federation even more again in the professional bodybuilding space. We've seen a tremendous increase in prize money availability start to go up. More shows are going up. It seems like the quality is at a level now that is more competitive in bodybuilding, which is really cool to see. Like there's always been like this group of 1 or 2 or 3 guys that have won every show, and it seems to be now that there's the opportunity for 5 and 6 and 7th number guy on the show to actually win if he shows up in shape. Similarly with the girls, there's been changing of the guards more frequently. So it seems to me like there's actually like more of an actual competition now, as opposed to a showing up to be given the place that you thought you deserved. And professionally for the guys in the IFBB, yeah, the money at the moment is getting absolutely bananas. Like Samson Dowders just took 600,000 US for winning the Olympia. Like that's fucking good money, man. I also think he's an incredible person to have won, not only because he's a good representation physically for bodybuilding, but he challenges the original belief that if you're at the top, you only compete once a year. And he's always been a person who's competed at multiple shows. And he said that he's already committing to compete at the Arnolds as the current Mr. Olympia, which has happened maybe 1 or 2 times. So he's willing to lose as the best, which is fucking cool. And I think that might start to shift the needle a bit too. So IFBB is just going to go leaps and bounds. I am very interested, though, to see how FMG go over the next probably 12 to 18 months. I think they're in a really good position to get a stranglehold on that sort of fitness fashion group of competitors, which I think is good to have, because there's some individuals in that like previous WBFF federation, their physiques didn't suit the IFBB. Like they just didn't. They were like more of the muscular gymnastic look, and that doesn't suit any of the divisions in the IFBB unless you're really willing to put on a shit ton of muscle and do women's physique. So specifically for the girls, I think FMG is very good, but it'll be interesting to see how it progresses because it's still relatively new.
Yeah, that was my second. Seeing how FMG progress over the next sort of 5 years, I think they're going to blow up pretty big. They look like they're putting, or any of potentially the not wrongdoings, but maybe slight errors made by the past in Australia, that Fitness Federation, WBFF, they kind of squashed and corrected. There's a little bit less focus on the social media side of things. It's still there in the judging, but there's a bit more focus toward the athlete, the physique, what's being presented on stage.
Yeah, there's actually a criteria for the physique rounds now as well, which there never used to be a criteria, like symmetry or muscularity or whatever it may be. And just to be clear, I think I'm not sure if it was a misspeak or just a misheard, but it wasn't the Australian crew that were behaving poorly for WBFF. They were actually the crew that stepped away from the WBFF Federation first, I think, and created FMG. So the issue is in the Canadian space, yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Now, I have a bunch more questions for you guys, but I am aware that time is getting on. So I'm just going to wrap it up with a...
let's rapid fire a few of them.
Okay. How easy/difficult do you find it to maintain a professional coach-client relationship and not let it blur into friendship?
I think this is neither hard nor easy. I think certain people cross that threshold because they're meant to, based on who they are as human beings, and providing that they can respect the professional aspect of the relationship and continue to create that divide, then there should be never any kind of issue or problem. That's not to say that everyone does do that, but there shouldn't really logistically be an issue with it. Some of my best coaches, like some of my best understanding of the client has typically come from a slight blurring of that line, meaning that I get a better understanding of this, which then allows me to coach them better. So I don't think it's neither a positive or negative, depends on the context.
Yeah, I agree. And same actually with some of my clients. I think the difference is just knowing when it's appropriate to again, like verbalize your high expectations of that person as an athlete, and then pulling them up on their performance or lack thereof when they do make mistakes, so that there's still a clear and easy distinction between that hierarchy. It's important that there is a hierarchy in a professional relationship. It's important there probably isn't one in a friendship. So to have it, you need to have like some friendship based sort of behaviors, but then there's still a hierarchy.
I find there's an easy way
So-
to your systems as well, though. It's like treating the professional side of things with your contact, like through WhatsApp. Everything for coaching side of things is email, WhatsApp. But if you want to talk to me as a friend, or you want to talk to me about something that's not related to bodybuilding, shoot me a message on Instagram, DM me, because that's more social stuff and enjoyment in my DMs.
I think that's a really important distinction as well. It's like you're putting on your uniform when you're in our coaching app and communicating there, or on emails or something like that, and you're sort of putting on your friendship hat on Instagram, and it helps with that distinction.
Yeah, I think that's a massive call on that one, because it's something that I know that we both do, George. So
I never used to, but since Dean was the one who told me about the distinction when I first started, about separating everything up and having these set points, and it was probably the best bit of advice I had for keeping on top of that side of things.
I'm reading through our other questions, and none of them are quick fire. Or these are all questions that need some unraveling, like food tolerances, intolerances in food prep, and so I think we are going to move to our wrap up points.
Okay, we're only 45 minutes in. That's all I was saying. That's all
okay.
good.
We usually finish with a less shit tip, but because this isn't necessarily a podcast where we're talking about supplements or something like that, shall we move on to the next one? Or are we giving it how to be less shit as a coach? Let's go with that, Dean.
As a coach, I would say use compliments sparingly so that they actually mean something.
Okay.
I think you can
Speaking
get
of
caught.
not giving compliments.
Yeah, it's exactly. It was actually one of one of our questions is things that we think we do well. I think although I don't give many of them, when I do give them, they come with a lot of weight and a lot of meaning. But it's important that just because you're not complimenting doesn't mean that you shouldn't be at least verbalizing to the person that you're not necessarily even impressed, but like the client is upholding the expectations of this relationship. But you compliment when you want them to be recognized for something they've done specifically well.
Yeah, absolutely. My one would be for any new coaches coming up, put less focus on your business marketing, less focus and investment into how to get leads, create lead magnets, email chains, whatever it is. Throw that in the bin and start taking up some educational courses and actually teach yourself about the human body, how it responds. Take up any courses on psychology so you can understand people better internally as well. They're all the things, and it was one of the best bits of advice that Joe, my last mentor, ever gave me, and that was that we're in a space that is forever evolving, and that means that we have to keep up with that pace, which means we never truly know everything and that we're always constantly learning. And if you don't come into the start point of your career with that mindset to learn, to grow, to keep diving into these new areas and spaces, you're going to find yourself falling short as you progress.
Okay.
Can I riff on that for 30 seconds? One of the questions that we had on my Instagram box was, if I was to start again, how would I expedite the process in becoming a contest preparation coach? And my answer would be don't try and expedite the process. Just fucking do better today and then do better tomorrow. And that shit will happen if you're good at it. And if you take genuine care. And that's exactly what George was talking about there for me, is build knowledge, build time, patience.
Yep. Well, I mean, this is what you guys were talking about when it comes to putting on muscle really, really quickly. Somebody who has been training for 20 years and is 100 kilos versus somebody who's been training for 3 years and is 100 kilos, it looks different. They haven't had the time that's necessary to build like the best physique that they can. And it's the same with your coaching skills. Like, okay, maybe you can get your books filled in a year, but do you have the experience? Do you have all the knowledge? Do you understand that coaching is an art and a science, and do you have them both down pat? No, you can't in that length of time. It takes time.
Yeah. As I say, safe instant gratification for masturbation.
Did you just make that up?
Yep. In my mind, I just went straight there. The rest of it takes time.
I want that in a t-shirt.
I'd be done really quick. Fuck you now. The weekdays, I don't want to ruin that.
See what I have to put up with, George?
No, I said for masturbation for yourself, mate, not for when involving another individual.
I still don't want it to be short and quick. I want to enjoy the process. I want to
hey, we're about efficiency here, George.
I think that's narcissism, isn't it? Like, yeah, you're real good at this, George.
I'm looking in the mirror, like I'm watching eye contact the whole time.
I love where this went. Okay, we're going to give us something worth sharing. Do either of you have something worth sharing? It doesn't have to be bodybuilding related. I got one if neither of you do.
No.
Not off the top of my head.
A cooking one for people that want to bulk cook, just because I just did it this morning. If you want extra juicy chicken, that requires very little cleanup. Buy yourself a sous vide circulator, spelled SOUS, new word, VIDE, sous vide, and batch cook your chicken in that. It's like Hainanese chicken if you've ever gone out for that style of Hainanese chicken. It's delicious. It's easy. Muy bien.
Okay. So it's how do you describe this? You get a pot of water, and the sous vide is like, I call it Dean's cooking dildo because that's what it looks like.
Well, the
And
sous
you
vide
insert
circulator is, yeah.
Okay, you insert that into the water bath, and the sous vide heats the water up to a particular temperature and maintains that temperature as set on the sous vide. And yeah, it does. You can cook more than meat in it, but it does make the meat very tender. It comes out grey and gross looking, but you can quickly like flash cook it on a pan.
Yeah, but the meat or the vegetable or the egg or whatever it is that you're cooking goes inside a vacuum sealed bag or an air displaced Ziploc bag. So it's cooked inside the water, but without touching it, which means it cooks inside its own juices, which keeps its flavor there, keeps its moisture there. For reference, if you cook chicken on a pan, it'll lose about 30% of moisture. If you cook it sous vide, it loses about 10%, which means mathematically it's 20% more juicy, or 300%, depending on which way you look at it, you know?
Hey?
Yeah. And then, yeah, you can flash fry, you can eat it as is, you can do whatever you want. It's very good. And they'll cost you maybe like $150. They'll last you, they're travel friendly. Fantastic.
If you use it all the time, I feel like it's a good investment. You know?
It's very cheap in reality, yeah.
But can you cook potatoes in it?
Yeah, you can actually do incredible mash in it.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, but what about fries? Can you do fries in a sous vide?
You could park cook them in a sous vide. Absolutely, you could. And then you put them in the air fryer. The only thing
if we just skipped a step and just put everything in the air fryer, it would all be cooked in one utensil.
Yeah, but park cooked potato before the air fryer is way better anyway.
No, absolutely, I agree on that.
But you wouldn't par cook it in the sous vide because it's more effort than just kind of boiling it lightly, right? And it would be the same result.
My mind is saying no, because if you was to salt the potatoes before you put them in there and add any other kind of flavoring that you wanted to, and then let those potatoes cook inside that flavoring for an hour, you would have that inside the potato that you then fry. It would definitely be better. Well, I shouldn't say definitely. Definitely is probably a little bit too committed. It may be better. I might test it. Fuck it.
Okay. Well, we will test it, Dean, and I'll put a little bit of salt and spices and stuff in the water that I parboil the potatoes in. See if there's a difference.
Sorry.
Okay, last question. Would you rather? Boys, would you rather? Every time you laugh, instead of laughter coming out of your mouth, it's this really sexual moan, or it burns every time you pee.
I require an example.
Of which you want me to moan sexually on the podcast? I flashed a nipple about a year ago, and I feel like that's going to maintain my height of sexuality on this podcast. So
a moany laugh,
no,
laugh every time. Was it you sneeze? Did you say? What was
a moany laugh. A moany sound every time you go to laugh.
Yeah. Right.
Or it burns every time you pee.
I could be sad for life and just not laugh, and then burning every time it pees is. To what level of burn are we talking?
Oh, enough to grimace.
Is it just a tip?
Like, is it kind of like chlamydia burn, or
what does that feel like?
I don't know, George. Describe to me what that feels like.
Like, are we talking nails, or are we talking like more spice, or are we talking temperature?
A little bit more spice combined with temperature.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go with that. Look, I've never thought that I've had to describe the details of your penis burning while you peed in.
Okay, let's unpick this a little bit more, George. If
I don't think it needs to be unpicked anymore. Just answer the fucking question.
No, this is important.
Oh my God.
Same volume of piss per day going out. Would you rather one big burny piss or multiple little burn pisses?
Definitely multiple little ones.
Oh no, I'm taking one big one.
Me too. So,
really? Oh, I'm not.
Oh, so but the limited time of more discomfort than multiple times of loads of discomfort.
You know,
but it's only very mild discomfort.
Yeah, but I can prepare myself. You know, I can be like, all right, this is the moment. Just grit your teeth. It is what it is. It's going to be 2 minutes of hell. Game on. It's like an ice bath, right? Whereas
2 minutes,
if I was like,
for 2 minutes.
If it's one a day, it's definitely 2 minutes.
If you just coming out with a semi-enlarged python, then it's going to take to get it out.
Well, yeah, the morning erect penis is even more difficult to pee from. So, you know, I'm going to go the one long burny pee, and I'm going to use pharmaceutical intervention to make sure that I don't have to piss except more than once or twice a day.
I'm probably just going off how much I piss per day and how much water I drink. I'm definitely taking the money laugh. Happily, I don't care. I will own it happily. It's more of a grunt anyway, so
No, you don't get to choose this. You've got a very feminine moan. Like people are uncertain as to whether or not it's you.
Would your decision be changed if it was a really feminine mode?
no, not at all. Again, I just blame Zoe. I'd be like, "Fucking, what are you doing?"
Imagine if someone cracked a joke at the gym and instead of laughing, you came out with this.
Or just now. I don't know if Jimmy Carr can be famous with his laugh. I think anyone can get away with any laugh. Actually, in hindsight,
his backward laugh. He like
it's a,
inhales in as he
no
laughs.
other way around, isn't it? Out. He goes.
I've always imagined him doing it in, making that sound. So I don't know.
No, he explained it on one saying the reason why it's so retarded is because I laugh on the out and not on the in, or something. Yeah.
I feel like
Because
I laugh on the out and I have a normal laugh.
I don't know. He's a weird
Who knows?
individual.
Who knows? We are getting a bit off topic. So before we bore everyone to death, shall we say goodbye? Please like, subscribe, give us a good review, flex_underscore success on social media. And we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, boys.
Cheers.